Canada is forging a new strategic partnership with China.
China remains the essential state in helping Russia continue the war against Ukraine.
Yesterday, Russia launched one of its largest drone and missile attacks on Ukraine in 4 years. Canada unequivocally condemns these indiscriminate attacks.
Yeah, open source suggests that 60% of the Russian effort is being covertly bankrolled by China.
Speaking of Mark Carney, he posted something, and it's to do with Russia, it's to do with Ukraine, but I think we need to remind everybody that it has less to do with Ukraine and Russia and more to do with China. So let's take a look. So Mr. Carney posted this on May 14th at 11:55 a.m. Yesterday, Russia launched one of its largest drone and missile attacks on Ukraine in 4 years. Canada unequivocally condemns these indiscriminate attacks. I express my deepest condolences to those injured and everyone mourning their loved ones. Canada stands with Ukraine as it defends itself against this unconscionable aggression, and we will work with allies to sustain pressure on Russia to bring this conflict to an end. And I'm very surprised that I did not find the word catalyze in there. But keep in mind the words Russia, launched, and drones. Just keep those words in mind, okay? Because those are going to be very important in a minute. He posted this a little bit earlier. So this was on May 6th. And he says, Canada and Europe share the values of freedom, rule of law, democracy, and pluralism. These values are the foundation of what we are building together. It's funny. It's not very often that I like the option see less in Facebook, but whenever I'm looking at one of his posts, I do like that option. And even in the transcripts of the video that this was actually from, you can see it starts with our shared values are born. As we know, one of the countries that Mark Carney loves to visit is the UK. And he loves getting praise from King Charles. He loves advertising that King Charles has validated appointments of the Governor General. He loved that all the pomp and circumstance that King Charles had when he came here to give the throne speech. And he loves to share how European Canada could be. Okay. Just for the sake of argument, I believe Mark Carney. Just for the sake of argument, I agree with Mark Carney.
Let's just pretend.
We share values. We share the same opinions. We share the same thoughts with our brothers and sisters in the UK government. This is interesting. UK imposes 100 new sanctions targeting Russia's revenues and military supplies. So, if we share our values with the UK, then clearly we should share this. The UK government has implemented 100 new sanctions designed to hit Russia's revenues and military supplies, including against its so-called shadow fleet carrying oil and electronics companies. Sanctions have also been imposed on the China-based Shenzhen Blue Hat International Trade Corporation and its Russian co-owners. Why is this important? Well, it's important because shortly after those sanctions, the PRC lost its mind and was jumping up and down about these sanctions that UK was actually putting against these companies. Well, why would you be upset about that, PRC? It's not you, right? It's not one of your state-owned companies, right? It's not like China has been helping Russia in the war of Ukraine, right?
Oh wait, we already talked about that a few weeks ago.
Chinese now have just discreetly built literal supply lines, railway lines that go to drone factories in Russia. Open source suggests that 60% of the Russian effort is being covertly bankrolled by China.
Well, I think things have changed.
It's absolutely useful for China to keep the West occupied in Ukraine. It's also quite useful for China to keep Russia occupied in Ukraine.
It's eyes wide open.
China didn't instigate Russia's attack on Ukraine. But what it's done is enable its continuation.
Well, I think things have changed.
It suits China to have this war ongoing.
It's eyes wide open.
It would be very happy to see Europe tied up spending a lot of its GDP on defence against something that looks like a frozen conflict around Ukraine, Belarus, etc., etc.
The negotiations that we've had with China have been more predictable and much more stable.
The world in which we need to start relying on China, this is not a world where human rights matter.
Yeah.
This is not a world where democracy matters.
You said it, Christia. Oh, wait. Right. You said it, Michael. Oh, no. No, I'm running out of liberals. You said it.
Handong.
Well, he's gone. But okay, so that was the Air Marshal, the UK Air Marshal, giving a briefing. Recall, and what he said right there, and what I told you to remember from the beginning, launched drones. 60% of Russians' drones are coming from China. So Mark Carney stands up and he wants to look all noble and statesmanlike and condemn the attacks on Ukraine from Russia. Well, if you really believe that, why are you entering into a strategic partnership with the country that is supplying Russia with all of their drones? So you can't really say that anymore, Mr. Carney. You're actually going into that, as Jolie says, with eyes wide open. Because this is not a secret. And I know it's not a secret. And people can say, well, that was from February. That was from February. Okay, fine. Well, let's go back to the UK Parliament in October of 2025 and see what they had to say there. You haven't seen this yet.
The recent SCO summit was striking in its failure to mention Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine, and the noble Baroness Bennett of Manor Park drew our attention to some of the really tragic consequences there. Instead, the gathering was another example of China using its diplomatic engagement with Russia to reduce Putin's isolation on the world stage. We consistently challenge China and other countries' political and military support for Russia, which prolongs this war and isn't in China's interest. China remains the essential state in helping Russia continue the war against Ukraine. That is the government's view. The UK continues to call on China to use its influence to support peace and stability, and that includes urging President Putin to end the war, withdraw Russian troops from Ukraine, and respect international law. And with regard to the noble Lord Bruce's observations, the government works closely not only with European partners but with G7 partners to make common cause on that.
This is the government whip. So he's basically the representative from the government who's answering questions, right? Now, this is from the Grand Committee, and this is the Grand Committee of the Lords. So basically what this is the equivalent of is we have something called the Committee of the Whole in Canada, where it's run like a committee, but it is in the House of Commons. Yeah. So committees are normally like 10 people, whereas the Committee of the Whole can be all 343 members of Parliament. Now, they can also have a Committee of the Whole in the Senate, which is our equivalent of the UK's House of Lords. So the Grand Committee is basically the Committee of the Whole in the UK version of the Senate.
Which is the House of Lords.
Yes. So he said some striking things right there. And the one that jumped out to me is basically essentially summarized as saying the only reason Russia can continue this war is because of China. So when the UK in their government is saying that, and then a couple of months later, their air marshal is saying essentially the actual data that is backing that up, that China is supplying 60% of Russians' drones that they're using to attack Ukraine with, as well as other military hardware. And then when they say, we're trying to work with other G7 countries to affect the same pressure on China, and then Canada goes off and secures a strategic partnership with China.
Canada's forging a new strategic partnership with China. A new strategic partnership between Canada and China. A partnership that will increase trade and catalyze new investment. Last week's new strategic partnership with China will make available tens of thousands of affordable electric vehicles in Canada.
Mark Carney then says, we share the values with our friends over in Europe and the UK. And then feigns this false remorse by saying, it's so terrible that Russia's attacking UK. We're trying to work and bring about an end to this war however we can. Well, how is that possible, Mark Carney?
Right, we just agreed to buy, 50,000 cars from China per year?
And that's set to go up.
Right. So we're putting money into the Chinese economy, and they are taking that money and supplying drones to Russia. And then we, on the other side, are supplying Ukraine with money. It doesn't make sense.